The Miami Hurricanes had a disastrous 2022 in Mario Cristobal's first year as head coach. 5-7, missed a bowl game, a losing record, and embarrassing losses to Duke and Middle Tennessee State. Can they turn it around in year two, 2023? We're going to find out in today's video. A complete season preview and a game-by-game prediction for the Miami Hurricanes. Let's go. Yeah, good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Also, Intuit edition of that as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are even watchable. You let me know down below about this one, whether you think it's watchable or not. Live call-in shows 2 nights a week, Tuesdays and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Give me a call. We'll talk some college football. Reminder that today is the cutoff for the Patreon suggestions for these prediction videos. About 2 months ago now, I put a post up on the Patreon page asking you all to let me know which teams you wanted me to do a prediction video for this year. I've been going through that list. There's about 20 or so teams still left to go on the list, and we're only about 3 weeks away from the start of the season, so I'm going to have to cut it off today. So if you're on the Patreon page and you have not let me know what team you want me to do yet, you need to go over to the Patreon page today and leave a comment on that post. Let me know what team you want to see. If you're not on the Patreon page and you want to take a look around or get signed up, there's a link in the description of this video. All right, we'll follow the same format we've done for all the other preview and prediction videos I've done. I think I've done somewhere between 15 and 20 of these things now, and like I said, got at least 20 or 25 to go. There's a playlist on the channel called 23 Predictions. If you want to, if you're curious about any of the other teams I've done or my thoughts on some of the other teams, just click that playlist. You can scroll through the list of teams and check out whichever ones you want. All right, let's recap last year, talk about who Miami lost, who's coming back. Then we'll put the schedule up on the screen for 2023, and we'll go through it game by game, and we'll give you a winner and a loser for every single week. Miami 5-7 last year. Mario Cristobal's first year on the job, came down from Oregon. A lot of hype. Mario Cristobal, I still think has potential to be a really good coach, and there's no doubt in my mind that he's a really, really good recruiter, and we'll talk about that some throughout this video. But not a lot of bright spots last year, at least on the field for Miami under Mario Cristobal. I mean, like I mentioned, they went 5-7. Their best wins were Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech. Those were their only 3 ACC wins. Their other 2 wins came against Group of 5 teams, and I mentioned their sort of embarrassing losses to Middle Tennessee State and Duke. And those are the types of losses that just can't happen if you're Miami. You have to get past that point. You know, right now, when you look across the landscape of the ACC, losing to a Clemson or even a Florida State there's really no shame in that. That's really not embarrassing. Now, I know Miami doesn't want to lose any games ever, particularly to Florida State, but if you just look at sort of the shape of some of these programs and the way that they are right now, there's no shame in losing to a Clemson or a Florida State. But Miami's got to get to the point where they're beating the Middle Tennessee States of the world before they can hope to get to where the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world are today, which, of course, both are ranked inside the top 10 of most preseason polls. Not the case for Miami. We'll get to that in a second. Mario Cristobal is an elite-level recruiter. He has proven that year after year after year during his time in college football. No matter where he's been, no matter what position he's held at the school he's been, he has always been an A++ recruiter. And when he came down to Miami, there was no doubt in my mind that that was going to continue, and that has been the case. The talent level has continued to increase at Miami under Mario Cristobal, and I expect that to continue into the future. Not only that, the majority of the staff that he's hired is elite recruiters as well. Now, John Ruiz, depending on how you feel about him in general, it looks like maybe they're looking into him right now for some possible wrongdoings. I'm not really going to get into that. That's an NIL issue, and really, in my mind, is sort of separate from what Mario Cristobal is doing or can do at the University of Miami in terms of recruiting. But I expect as long as Miami keeps Mario Cristobal, the talent level will continue to increase. What it's going to come down to is patience from the administration and from the fans. Do the fans and the administration have the patience to suffer through 5-7 seasons under Mario Cristobal, as long as it means that they are getting better down the road? And we're going to find those things out, and I think we'll learn a lot more about that, obviously, this year. Miami needs to improve on that 5-7 record. I think they have to find a way to make a bowl game. Back-to-back losing seasons, no matter how well you're recruiting, is going to place Mario Cristobal on the hot seat in 2024. So they got to find a way to win a few more games this year than they did than they did last year. Let's look at a few numbers. I've done this for every team that I've previewed so far. So where do I have Miami ranked heading into 2023? I've got them unranked. I mean, it's hard to have a lot of faith, or at least a lot of top 25 faith, in a Miami team who went 5-7 last year with some really bad losses, and they're only in year 2 of the current head coach, right? So it's not like I have a bunch of other seasons where Mario Cristobal has been at Miami and won 7, 8, 9 games that I can kind of fall back on. I only really have the one season at Miami to go on. It wasn't great, and when we look forward to the roster, you're going to see they have some improvement in certain areas, but there are some obvious holes and question marks there too. Doesn't mean Miami can't finish the season unranked, but right now, at least heading into the season, I've got them outside of my top 25. If I was going to rank them, I would probably have them somewhere in like the 30 to 35 range right now. Again, doesn't mean they can't move up and even maybe into the top 25 as the season goes along. Nationally, where is Miami ranked? If you start to look at a lot of the preseason rankings and polls that float around every year, whether you're talking about your big names like ESPN, Fox Sports, whatever, or some of the smaller blogs or even YouTube channels, mostly unranked. I had a hard time finding any polls or rankings at all that had Miami ranked. How many wins is Miami expected to get in 2023? Now, this is a Vegas win total number. This is sort of a betting thing, but it gives you a pretty good indication of how people feel about a team heading into the season. The expected win total for Miami is at 7.5, and I know you can't win 7.5 games, but for those of you who maybe don't gamble on sports or don't understand how these numbers work, what that means is you can either bet over or under that number, right? So if you think Miami's going to win more than 7.5 games, which of course would be 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, 11-1, or 12-0, you'd bet over 7.5. If you think they're going to struggle again, maybe win less than that 7.5, you could bet the under, meaning you think they're going to go 7-5, 6-6, 5-7 like they did last year, whatever the case. So it's a pretty good indication of how the betting public or the general college football public feels about a specific team heading into a season. Their win total expected to be around 7.5. What about Heisman Trophy contenders for the University of Miami? Well, this is kind of an interesting story here. You look at Tyler Van Dyke, the returning quarterback. This would be, I guess, his third year there. Heading into last season, so this time last year, Tyler Van Dyke was in the top 5 Heisman odds. He had a really good 2021, particularly the last 5 or 6 games. I've even said I think Tyler Van Dyke was one of the best 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the country over the last half of 2021. Now, that kind of all came apart last year in 2022. A lot of that, of course, can be attributed to injury with Tyler Van Dyke. He missed some time, battled injuries most of the season. They also had a brand new offensive coordinator, which was his second offensive coordinator in 2 years, Josh Gattis. Josh Gattis has now been fired. So you got now his third offensive coordinator in 3 years. We'll talk about him in a second. But Tyler Van Dyke is the highest Miami Hurricane in terms of Heisman odds for 2023. Nowhere near that top 5 number he had last year, though. 42nd in Heisman odds for Tyler Van Dyke heading into 2023. His odds are, that puts him basically the same odds as people like Garrett Nussmeier, who's the backup quarterback for LSU, and Tanner Mordecai, the starting quarterback for Wisconsin, who transferred from a group of 5 team SMU. So that just sort of gives you an idea betting-wise of how people feel about Tyler Van Dyke's chances at the Heisman this coming year. What about winning the ACC title in 2023? Sort of a long shot, but surprisingly tied for 5th in the odds. Now, the reason I say this is surprising is because I believe the ACC Media Days wrapped up last week, and I believe the ACC Media voted Miami to finish 7th or 8th, something like that, in the ACC. But according to people who are willing to put money on these things, they've got the 5th best odds to win the ACC. They're tied with Pitt at plus 2,000. The teams, of course, ahead of them, Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, and North Carolina. National title, you're talking about super long shots here. They've got the 30th best odds in America of winning a national title at plus 15,000. That puts them on par with teams like South Carolina, Auburn, Iowa, and Kentucky, just to sort of give you a general idea, again, of how the betting public feels about Miami heading into 2023. Well, let's take a look at Miami's offense for 2023. Obviously, has to get a lot better than what we saw in 2022. Mario Cristobal realizes that. Gone is Josh Gattis, fired after 1 year as offensive coordinator under Mario Cristobal, and they bring in Shannon Dawson, who runs an air raid style of offense. Now, we'll see how much of that air raid offense that he's known for is going to be utilized at Miami in year one. I've got some serious questions about Miami's wide receivers, so we'll see. They scored 23 points per game last year, which is just absolutely horrendous in today's college football. Most of the rules these days in college football favor the offense. You can't get anywhere near the QB anymore. You even look at them, it's a penalty. You've got the targeting situation in the secondary. You can't, you can only hit receivers from like a 2-foot area from here to here. There's just a lot of rules, and you've got the zone reads or whatever it is, where the linemen are allowed to go downfield and you can still throw the ball. There's just a lot of changes that have happened with college football over the last 5 to 10 years that have really been beneficial towards the offense. So to only score 23 points a game in today's college football is really, really bad. That's clearly an eye-popping stat. You just look at that one thing and say, well, if that doesn't get any better, you can expect another 5-7 record. And I kind of agree. The offense is going to have to get a lot better. They're going to have to figure out a way to score more points. What led to that last year? Well, we talked about a couple of the issues already. Gaddis as an offensive coordinator. Now, I didn't like this guy from the get-go when he was at Michigan. How he won assistant coach of the year or whatever it was at Michigan a couple of years ago still boggles my mind. I can think, and I'm by no means an expert when it comes to like rattling off assistant coaches or coordinators from around the country. I could easily name 10 assistants, coordinators, or position coaches that to me are way better than Josh Gaddis. But for whatever reason, Josh Gaddis seems to be one of these guys whose reputation is much better than his actual results. I don't get it. I didn't like him at Michigan. I didn't like the hire when Mario Cristobal brought him into Miami, and obviously he's gone after 1 year. They're replacing him with Shannon Dawson, like we mentioned, who's been running an air raid offense. I can't wait to see how that plays out in Miami this year. I'm sure Tyler Van Dyke likes that, or at least the idea of that. Like I said, the problem's going to be the wide receivers. There's not really an established star wide receiver on the Miami Hurricanes roster. Now, every time I say that about a certain team, whatever team, I get comments from fans of that team that say, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He clearly doesn't know who this guy is or that guy is or this guy is. That's the point. If everybody knows who Marvin Harrison is, Emeka Egbuka. I mean, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. Everybody knows who the star wide receivers are in college football. The fact that I don't know who your wide receivers are without looking it up is all the proof, really, that you need. They've got to get a lot better production out of those wide receivers, particularly if they are going to switch over and go all in on this air raid offense that Shannon Dawson likes to run, which I'm not convinced that they're going to do. But anyway, we'll see. But I do like Tyler Van Dyke if he can stay healthy. The Gaddis thing was a disaster. You got rid of him. You bring in Dawson, third offensive coordinator in 3 years for Tyler Van Dyke. Now, that could be a problem. And his health. He's got to stay healthy. Those are two concerns for me when I look at Tyler Van Dyke. But if they can avoid some of the injuries that plagued them last year, and if Tyler Van Dyke and Shannon Dawson can kind of click, then I think Miami's offense can take a pretty big step forward in 2023 if they can get some development from the wide receiver position. When you look at the offensive line, while I don't think the offensive line is going to be great, I think it's going to be a lot better than what it was last year. They bring in two transfers that I think will probably start right away. One from Central Florida, one from Bama. I think it was Central Florida and Bama. So I think immediately that gives you two offensive line positions, to me anyway, where you are better than what you were last year. Zion Nelson, probably the best offensive lineman on the team. Again, sort of like Tyler Van Dyke, battled injuries last year. If he can come back anywhere close to 100% healthy, he's got the potential to be the best offensive lineman on this team, and I think a pretty good starter. And Miami, if you look at their recruiting class from last year, a couple of their higher-rated recruits were offensive linemen. I would not be surprised at all to see at least one true freshman starting on the offensive line for Miami this year, and maybe even two. If not in week one, at some point towards the middle or end of the season, I would not be at all surprised to see two true freshmen starting offensive linemen for Miami, which is not ideal. But again, Miami's offensive line was so bad last year. They've got to kind of shake things up. And I do think Miami's offensive line will be much improved over 2022. Let's take a look at the defensive side of the ball. And just like on the offense, they have decided to change leadership over there, bringing in Lance Guidry to run the defense in 2023. So Mario Cristobal proving he's not afraid to shake things up after year one. And let's be honest, it's probably a good idea when you go 5-7 with humiliating losses to Duke. in Middle Tennessee State. So a new defensive coordinator on defense. We'll see what that means for Miami in 2023. But how about this for a weird stat, or I don't know if weird's the right word, but it kind of surprised me. Miami has a returning All-American on defense for the first time since 2006. Now, they've had a handful of All-Americans between 2006 and now, but they've always, they've all been juniors or seniors who immediately went pro. This is the first time Miami's had a returning All-American since 2006, and I'm talking about safety Cameron Kitchens. And safety might be the best position group on Miami's team, because the other safety is former five-star James Williams. He could have a really big year. Five-star on the defensive line, Leonard Taylor. So Miami's got some five-stars spread across this defense. We talked about Mario Cristobal's recruiting and how the talent level at Miami should continue to increase year over year. But I think talent-wise, Miami's got some potential stars on this defense. Now, they still have question marks at all three levels. They lost both cornerbacks off of last year's team, including Tyreek Stevenson, so they're going to have two new starting corners. This is another area where they went out to the transfer portal to try to bring in some help. Defensive end, though, you get both of those guys back. Messiter, I believe, and was one of them's name, and Harvey. If I'm getting those wrong, I apologize. But anyway, your two defensive ends are back. They combined for 12.5 sacks last year. You would expect some increased production there just based off of experience alone. And at linebacker, of course, Wesley. This is another one. I don't name these people, but Wesley Bizainth. I don't know what I really don't know what his name is, but he could have a really big year. He was impressive last year, could have an even bigger role in 2023. So Miami's got pieces at all three levels to work with, right? I like those two defensive ends that come back with 12.5 sacks from last year. Obviously, you've got two five-star safeties on the field, one of which is a returning All-American. And you got this guy at linebacker who I think could be way better than what he was last year. Bigger role this year. Again, also, though, question marks, right? Outside pass rush, outside of those two defensive ends, linebackers, outside linebackers, and the two corners that you lost last year. We'll see how it works out between the recruits that you brought in and the two transfers. Overall, just like with the offense, I think Miami's defense will be better in 2023 than it was in 2022. Good enough to win the ACC? No. Good enough to get to double-digit wins? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Let's put the schedule up on the screen for Miami. We're going to go through it game by game, and I'll give you a winner and a loser for every single week. All right, here we go. Schedule on the screen. Start things out with Miami of Ohio, the Red Hawks, at home, kind of. You don't have a home stadium, which I've made my thoughts on that known. I think that's a problem. Some of the Miami fans want to pretend that it's not. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that here. I think you'll beat Miami of Ohio. You have to beat Miami of Ohio. Mario Cristobal cannot have any more Middle Tennessee State situations. You got to find a way to win this game. I think Miami will. Plenty of time to prepare. First game of the season. Shouldn't be a whole lot of injuries. Hopefully nothing happens in the preseason or sort of the month of August when practice starts leading up to this game for either team. We don't want to see any injuries ever. But Miami should win this game. They're 1-0. And then this is what I really think this is probably the most important game of the season for Miami. And I know that sounds weird because it's early in the year. It's a non-conference game against a team you hardly ever play. It's not like it's a rivalry game or anything like that. But perception-wise, I just think this game is huge. Both of these teams, Miami and Texas A&M, massively underperformed and struggled last year. Texas A&M went 5-7. Miami went 5-7. They played last year. Texas A&M won in College Station. This year, the game is at Miami. Now, here's the thing. I don't really think that the outcome of this game is going to affect the outcome of games down the road necessarily. However, the loser of this game is going to get clowned into oblivion on the internet. And at least for what we do around here, that makes for some quality entertainment. I think Texas A&M is just way more talented than Miami. Last year was obviously a complete disaster for them. They've made some serious and significant changes in the offseason as well, bringing in Bobby Petrino to sort of help with the offense. Now, we'll see how much of the offense he actually gets to run and control, and that's the big question. But as much as I like Mario Cristobal, as much as I like his recruiting ability, Jimbo Fisher's just got, a 5-6 year head start on him at Texas A&M, and it's just not my opinion. You look anywhere you want at any metric. Texas A&M is just a lot more talented, top to bottom, than Miami is. I realize this game is in Miami. Unfortunately, again, my opinion, Miami doesn't provide much of a home field advantage. Nothing like it did years ago, and I expect Texas A&M will come in and win this game. Miami's 1-1. Bethune-Cookman, again, has to be a win. At Temple, has to be a win. I think Miami starts 3-1, 4 non-con games. Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman at Temple, all wins. I think a close loss at home to Texas A&M. I just think that Texas A&M defense is going to be too much. I think Miami's going to struggle to move the ball. I like Tyler Van Dyke. I like the new offensive coordinator. The question marks for me at wide receiver are going to make it difficult for Miami to move the ball against Texas A&M. And even if Texas A&M's offense isn't all that much better than what we saw last year, which was horrendous, I think Texas A&M scores just enough to get that win. Miami starts 3-1. Not a terrible start. And then you have a bye week. Come out of your bye week, and then you got your slate of conference games beginning at home against Georgia Tech, a team with a brand new head coach, Brent Key. I'm not that high on Georgia Tech. Some of the Georgia Tech fans, I think, are higher on Brent Key than I am. I do think Brent Key is an obvious upgrade over Jeff Collins, but me or you would be an obvious upgrade over Jeff Collins. This is a game you cannot lose. It feels like there's a lot of games on Miami's schedule against bad teams that are can't-lose games. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is because last year you lost a couple of those games. And regardless of what Miami's overall record ends up being at the end of 2023, you need to avoid the point-and-laugh losses, I think. The Middle Tennessee States, the getting blown out by Duke. You can't lose this game to Georgia Tech. You get them at home. I'm going to give you a win against Georgia Tech and their first-year head coach, Brent Key. You're 4-1. Things start to get a lot more difficult now, though. You go on the road to take on North Carolina, probably the best quarterback in the ACC, Drake May. Their defense is absolutely horrendous, specifically their secondary. But again, I'm just not convinced Miami's going to have the pieces year 2 under Mario Cristobal to really take advantage of that. Even if they do, I think North Carolina and Drake May found a way to outscore Miami. I think Miami drops this one. That's their second loss of the season. Then you come back home and play Clemson, the favorite to win the ACC, them in Florida State. I don't see you beating Clemson. Even if their offense doesn't get any better, they've got a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, a sort of renewed optimism there in Clemson for what they might be able to do in 2023. I'm not necessarily as high on Clemson as some other people are. In fact, I predicted Clemson to go 9-3, but they're going to beat Miami. I think this is a mismatch. Again, playing this game at home, in my opinion, is only a benefit to Miami in that it's not played at Clemson. There's just not enough of a home field advantage right now at Miami, I don't think, to really make that much of a difference. I think Clemson gets the win. It's your third loss of the year. Again, at home against Virginia, a can't-lose game. This would be a point-and-laugh situation if you lost it. Virginia and Virginia Tech have been the laughingstock not just of the ACC, but really of college football for what seems like forever now. You cannot lose this game at home. These types of games, the Virginias, the Georgia Techs, these are going to be the difference between Miami making a bowl game or Miami going 5-7 again. You got to win this game against Virginia. I think you do. I gave you the W. Back-to-back road games here at NC State and at Florida State, and I think you lose them both. I know NC State lost Devin Leary to the transfer portal, but I do like their coach. I like their defense. I don't think they've got nearly the hype heading into this season that they had last season, but I think they're probably going to have a similar season overall. You have to play them there. I think they get the win. And Florida State, as much as it pains you to hear it right now, is just miles ahead of you. You can point out any stat you want. You can tell me anything you want about recruiting. You can tell me anything you want about Mike Norvell. You can tell me anything you want about anything. Florida State is right now where you wish you were. They're a top 10 team heading into the season. They won 10 games last year. They're expected to compete and maybe even win the conference, something Miami has never done. I think Florida State bends you over again. I've got you losing that one on the road at Doak Campbell. And then you finish things up with Louisville and on the road at Boston College. A lot of people who follow the ACC a lot closer than I do keep telling me to keep an eye on Louisville this year. I don't really see it. I'm not the world's biggest Jeff Brom fan, I'll admit, the coach that they brought in for Purdue, so it's his first year there. I've looked at Louisville's schedule, and I will admit, By ACC standards, it appears to be a fairly manageable schedule. They avoid what most people think are the best 3 or 4 teams in the ACC, and that is beneficial. Overall, I still just don't think they're going to be a great team. You get them at home. I think this game is probably another one that's the difference between you making a bowl game or not. And I think you lose this one. I gave it to Louisville, but I'm going to be honest. Of all the games on this schedule, this was the hardest one for me to pick because I'm not as high on Louisville as everybody else is. Now, if everybody else is right about Louisville and I'm wrong, Louisville probably beats you easily. I think this is going to be a close game, but I am leaning Louisville. And then I think you get a win on the road to close things out at Boston College. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losses. That is an improvement over last year. That's not a losing record, and you will be bowl eligible. However, I don't think that's going to be enough to satisfy the majority of the Miami Hurricanes fans. Now, just because Uncle Lou says you're going 6-6 obviously doesn't mean that you are. Hell, last year I had you at 10-2. And you went 5-7 or whatever. So, but this is my honest prediction and sort of outlook for Miami. Games that I think are pretty much, a guarantee. I'm over 90% confident you'll win. Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, Temple, Georgia Tech, Virginia. I don't see any way possible you lose any of those 5 games. And if you do, like I mentioned, it's going to be a point-and-laugh situation. Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, Temple, Georgia Tech, Virginia. That's 5 games you have got to win. To me, any win over and above that is sort of a check in the plus column for Mario Cristobal. So you start going through them and saying, well, what are our chances? Let's go back to that Texas A&M game. Now, I've got you losing that one and them winning. If you're good enough to beat Texas A&M in week 2, and I'm wrong, and you beat that game, or you beat Texas A&M and win that game, not only does that make you 2-0, that would make you then 3-0 after you beat Bethune-Cookman, 4-0 after Temple, and 5-0 after Georgia Tech. 5-0. You'll be ranked if that's the case. If you're good enough to beat Texas A&M, you're good enough to beat 1 or 2 more of the teams that I thought you would lose to. So maybe you beat a North Carolina. Maybe you pull an upset against Florida State. Maybe you beat Louisville. So that's why I said at the beginning of the video that I think the Texas A&M game is sort of the key to how Miami's season ends up going. It's not that if I think you lose that game, it's going to ruin your season, or if you win that game, it's going to make your season. It's just how I view that matchup. If you're good enough to beat Texas A&M, then in my opinion, you're good enough to beat some of these other teams that I've got you losing to. So I'll admit I'm not very confident overall in my 6-6 projection for Miami. And a lot of it hinges on that Texas A&M game. If you beat Texas A&M, you could go 8-4. If you lose to Texas A&M, then 6-6 I think becomes a possibility. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Miami for 2023. Be sure and let me know in the comment section down below where you thought I was wrong. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Have a good morning. When it played. I don't know. Oh, man, something's wrong with me.